Welcome everybody. It's great to be back here. It's hard to believe 26 years. That you could really be a legal drinker if you were born the first year we did this. This year is really special, and I know every year I try to come up with something different, something new, et cetera, et cetera. But this year I'm really excited for a variety of reasons because in addition to having the one and only Eddie Muller here, who's been a part of this festival as long as I have. And Eddie will be signing his new revised Dark City Dames book tomorrow and presenting Johnny O'Clock with Evelyn Keyes. There are a lot of dedicated people that work in the studio archives that are very supportive of the Film Noir Foundation and this festival and me. And I was really, really pleased Paramount was able to make 2 DCPs of 2 movies that have not been seen streaming, Blu-ray, whatever, Paid in Full and Unmasked with Ray Burr, and also Swell Guy from Universal. And Universal worked tirelessly to clear the rights with the Hellinger estate and has a new 35mm print that we're going to see. Our opening night film stars Errol Flynn and Barbara Stanwick. Does it get better than that? It does not. And to tell us about that and introduce the film with me, we have our special guest, who I met up in Lone Pine. In fact, I met before that. We exchanged books, and then we met at Lone Pine last October. And I am so thrilled that she is here. I've got to hang out with her for about a day and a half. And please welcome to the stage, Rory Flynn. So Rory, this is kind of a trip back for you to Palm Springs. And up front, why don't we let this Palm Springs audience know that you used to live here?
Yes, I spent 2 years living here in Palm Springs with my mother. She spent a lot of time at the Racquet Club. They got into tennis. You know, my father sort of introduced her to tennis. But during the years that she was separating from my dad, she spent a lot of time here. We rented a house here for 2 years. My memories of Palm Springs, I was telling, I think you about it, about we had this pool in the backyard, and my sister and I would go out there at night and swim at night, and these bats would come down into the pool to drink. And I remember just diving into the water to try to avoid the bats. Anyways, It was such a special experience. I've never had anything like that. You had all the stars out at night and the bats coming down. Mm-hmm. But
none of them named Bela Lugosi, I take it.
But my mother did have a good friend, Ann Southern, who her daughter used to be friends with my sister, and we had a trampoline, and anyways, it was a fun time.
Now, your memories of your father, your book is basically the Baron of Mulholland.
Correct.
And he was, and we talk about that, but I know the back and forth between Jack Warner and Errol Flynn, and Jack really liked your dad, which was rare. He called him the Baron, and Errol called Jack Warner Sporting Blood.
Sporting Blood, exactly.
But talk about the house on Mulholland and the theme of your book and how those two things were together.
And one of the things my dad said was that he wanted that place so that he could look down on Warner Brothers and wave to Jack in case he was looking for him. You know, I'm up here at the pool, that's what he'd been. Right. My growing up there was wonderful. My dad was a big fan of animals, loving animals. He collected almost from every film he was on, he collected an animal, a horse. Mm-hmm. We had sheep up there, we had everything, dogs, cats, everything. But he did get this one monkey. Remember Chico?
Yes,
All right,
this monkey in there.
He brought it home, and it was the most horrible thing ever. I mean, it's just, it was so terrible. My grandmother, I remember seeing a picture of my grandmother, and she had a broom outside. I thought she was sweeping. No, she was hitting the monkey to keep him out of the house. because he'd go in and tear up the whole kitchen and throw. Anyways, my dad finally gave him to the zoo in Griffith Park.
A wise move, a wise move. I know John Huston had a monkey that when he married Evelyn Keyes, and it tore up Evelyn Keyes' apartment.
It's not a good pet.
And Evelyn said, "John, you need to get rid of that monkey." And he looked at her and said, "Well, kid, I've had that monkey longer than we've been married."
Oh, nice one.
Anyway, so how did your mom and dad meet? Briefly.
Well, that's pretty classic. How did they meet? He was on trial for rape, I guess. About that time, my mother was working. My grandfather was captain of the sheriff's department. And outside the courtroom, my mother, he gave her out of high school. He said, "You're going to work at this cigarette stand." So she was there, and really gorgeous. My mother was really beautiful. And of course, my dad spotted her a mile away. And I think he said, who did he send over there? Wasn't
Buster Wiles?
It was Buster Wiles.
Yeah, stuntman, buddy.
Yeah. My father was too much of a coward to go over. Well, on the other hand, he knew that it wouldn't be a good idea if he approached her. So he sent his guy over and said, "Would you like to meet Errol Flynn?" Blah, blah, blah. So that's how they met. And my grandmother took her up to the house, and he served her lunch at the pool. Yeah, you can imagine how he charmed her. So.
Oh yeah. Your dad also was a great yachtsman, and the boat and all of that. That was a major part of his life. Do you have any memories of being on that boat, or?
Yeah. He as far as the water and the ocean, it represented freedom and adventure to him. I don't think he was ever without a boat from his very young age. But my dad came from Tasmania, which no one had ever heard of, right? And Jack Warner told everybody he was from Ireland. Anyway, Tasmania was like this penal colony. That's where they built prisons down there, and from Australia, from England, they sent convicts down there to build the prisons. And good place to put them. I guess that's what Trump's trying to do right now. Anyway, and so when my grandfather, who was a marine biologist, he was a professor, and they transferred him from Sydney to work at the Tasmanian, the University of Tasmania. So he went down there, he took his wife, my grandmother, and she hated every second of it. She just, but she managed to stay there with him, raised Errol until he was 10 years old, and then she got pregnant and decided that she was not going to live in Tasmania anymore. She says, "I'm not raising a child here." So she moved back to Sydney. And so my father grew up with his father, who was a scientist, right? And the Tasmanian devil and the Tasmanian tiger and all of these things. He was, exploring that.
I think your dad, one of the things your dad always respected and liked, he was a writer. Yes. And he wrote several novels like Beam Ends of his sailing adventures in the top end of Australia and going to New Guinea and so forth. And then he started acting in plays, and he ended up in England in those quota quickies. Jack, it's really kind of a Cinderella story on how he ended up there. He paid his dues, but still, it was.
Yeah, he paid his dues, definitely. Imagine just sailing a boat, you're 17, and you're taking off from Sydney, and you go up to New Guinea to look for a gold strike that was happening up there. And sailing up there on this little boat that four guys, very young.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about Errol is, when someone becomes a major star, like your dad did with one picture, which was Captain Blood, there's a line of people forming to take credit for, I discovered him, I did this, I did that. And in doing my research for my biography of Michael Curtiz, what I found out, it was really Jack Warner that said, Hal Wallace didn't want to use him, and Curtiz didn't have time to train actors. And there's a letter from Jack Warner saying, "We brought him over here to be in pictures. I want him used in this picture," which was a Perry Mason mystery. He had a very brief part. And Wallace and Curtiz were just saying, don't worry about it. And Jack Warner forced them to do it. And then when they did all of the tests for Captain Blood, he was the guy.
Yeah.
He was the guy. They were going to use Robert Donat,
Yeah.
and then he got sick, and of course he ended up staying and making the 39 Steps for Hitchcock. So Jack Warner, thought that, as long as he could be wheeled in on a gurney into the soundstage,
Right,
he should
right.
fulfill his contract. But they cast your dad, and history was made. But I always got the feeling he kind of thought those pictures that we revere as classics, like The Adventures of Robin Hood, The Seahawk, all of this, that he felt they were kind of silly boys' adventures. Did you get that impression?
I find it really interesting because my dad, when you first see him on the screen in Captain Blood, he's 25 years old. And the first 25 years, and he died at 50, so the first half of his life was completely adventure. I mean, he ran away from home, he went to New Guinea, he traveled around the world, he hitchhiked all over the world, and probably ended up at every brothel in the world along the way too. Ended up in England and decided at one point he'd been in a little film in Tasmania. So he said, maybe I can be an actor. And that's how it happened. But it's just amazing. See, all that he did for 25 years before he hit America was all in his, you see it on the screen, and he's so young, 25 in Captain Blood.
Yeah.
But he had so much experience, life experience, traveling all over the world, and that he brought that to the screen. He was able to be that 25-year-old.
Well, you don't think of any, at least with all due respect to Douglas Fairbanks Sr., when I think of Robin Hood, I think of Errol Flynn. I don't think of any other actor, period. And what was interesting was his, Curtiz and him became stars together in a certain way. Curtiz's stock rose at Warner Brothers, and he and Errol did not get along at all due to Curtiz's propensity for picking on the little people and the yelling, venting pressure by yelling at people and so forth. And I think it got where they made 10 or 11 films together, and there was a film, Dive Bomber, in '42, and they got into an actual physical confrontation.
I didn't know.
Oh yeah, and Olivia de Havilland said it was a bad situation. So that, at that point, the studio had to break up the partnership, but the thing that was very poignant was when, and you know this story, I saw Sam Goldwyn Jr., who made The Proud Rebel and was close to Curtiz near the end, and one of the second film they made together was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn that was released in '60, and one of the parts, Errol came in 1958, not long for this world, in really bad shape, to apply because he needed the work and he needed the money. And I said, what happened? And he said, Mike handled him beautifully. And at one point, he gestured at Mike and said to me, well, you see that guy? That's my career there. And they let him go. And Sammy told me, when we went home that day, we would go back and forth and talk about what we did today, what we're going to do tomorrow. But he gave Curtiz a ride home and said he didn't say anything. And he says, when I pulled up to leave him out, he had tears in his eyes, and he said, actor studio can make actor, only God makes star.
Yeah, really.
So he knew, Curtiz knew.
Yeah, in the end.
And that in the end, your father,
That's a
your
nice
father's
ending to the
talent.
story,
it is a nice
actually,
ending.
yeah.
It is a nice ending. And this film is interesting because one of the things that the records reflect, the production records, is your dad was always agitating not to be in something where he didn't have a gun or a sword in his hand. He wanted to do a straight part. And this particular movie, he kind of is supporting the Barbara Stanwyck character, who's preeminent in this. But he wanted to do that because I think he wanted to do the picture. He wanted to work with Stanwyck. He also was a producer
On this, yeah.
on this,
Right.
and I used the term producer in that he formed his own production company so he wouldn't have to pay the horrific capital gains tax that was, taking 3/4 of actors' salaries around this time, and did that. But what's interesting is that Catherine Turney wrote this, and she was Betty Davis's favorite screenwriter. She also wrote a good deal of the Mildred Pierce script but declined a joint screen credit. And she said later in a Late Life interview, bad advice from an agent, dumbest thing I ever do is took my name off of Mildred Pierce. But she wrote this, and I think the picture turned out really, really well. And Errol plays a distinctly non-swashbuckling un-Errol part. So I think people are going to like that. And the fact that you're here to talk about your dad is terrific. Is terrific. Now, didn't they show movies up there at Mulholland Drive?
Oh, you want to hear that story? Okay.
No, I think they would.
Yeah. Well, if I tell you about the house, first of all, my dad built it. He designed it and built this house, and it looked very much like an Australian farm. And we'd have parties all the time. My dad loved to give parties. He really did, and he'd surprise my mother. Very romantic. He had the pool filled with gardenias, and he'd have a band up there. I mean, it was, really. And we had to stay upstairs and look out the window because children were not, seen and not heard. Mm-hmm. So we had a party one day, and what he would do, he'd put the kids in the projection room. We had a room where they showed films, and he'd get all the cartoons from Warner Brothers and show the kids all the cartoons. So a good friend of mine, Chris Costello, is there. Her dad, Lou, is there. And he was a big collector of films too, Lou, and he would trade films with my dad, right? So anyways, one day my mother and dad are at the party, they're fixing hors d'oeuvres in the kitchen, and my mom goes, I don't hear the kids laughing in there. You better go check on them. So he went in there, and what was on the screen was a porno film that Lou Costello had accidentally slipped in with the cartoons there, and all the kids were like, he's walked in, there's silence, dead silence, and all their mouths are dropped open. Anyways, that was a very funny story.
This was not Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
Yeah, so those kind of things happened a lot.
Yeah.
But he did give us great parties. So
yeah, he did. Any last thing you'd like to share about your dad before we run the movie?
No, not really. I miss him terribly, and my whole thing is really just trying to keep his name alive, and show as many of his great films to people who appreciate it. That's all.
Your dad was in terms of acting, he was a really, really criminally underrated actor.
I know, definitely.
And when you see the movies that he's in, the ones that we remember, I can't see how anyone else could play those parts with more panache than
James
Errol
Cagney
Flynn.
is not going to play Robin Hood.
Yeah, James Cagney. Yeah, they actually tried to cast James Cagney in Robin Hood. Could you see James Cagney, little legs and green tights? I don't think so. But he was the big star then, and that's why people went to movies. So, well, Rory, thanks so much for coming. Enjoy Cry Wolf. We're going to run it now.